Daniel Reeves planted his feet at the entrance of Meridian Tower, his trembling hand raised to block the most powerful woman in pharmaceuticals from entering her own building. When CEO Natalie Harrington's eyes met his, she had no idea that the desperate janitor's next words would shatter her world and leave her fighting back tears that would change both their lives forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The words tore through the crisp morning air like a thunderclap. Ma'am, you can't go in there. Natalie Harrington froze, one hand on the gleaming chrome door handle of Meridian Tower. The familiar rhythm of the city honking, taxis, chattering pedestrians. The distant wail of sirens seemed to fade into white noise as she turned to face the source of those words. Her security detail moved as one, converging on a man in a blue janitor's uniform standing in the entrance with his arm outstretched, palm forward like a human barricade. "Step aside," ordered Marcus, her head of security, positioning himself between Natalie and the janitor. His hand drifted instinctively toward the inside of his jacket. The janitor didn't budge. His face was pale, lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with a desperate intensity that made Natalie pause. This wasn't the look of a protester or a disgruntled employee. This was something else entirely. "Please," the man said, his voice cracking. "I need 2 minutes of your time. Just 2 minutes, and then I'll never bother you again." Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, this is Natalie Harrington, CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. She doesn't have 2 minutes to spare for unscheduled interruptions." Natalie checked her watch. A sleek, custom-designed piece worth more than what most people earned in a year. She was already running 7 minutes behind schedule. Meeting that would decide the fate of the company's groundbreaking new drug. 7 minutes was an eternity in her. "Ms. Harrington," the janitor persisted, ignoring Marcus. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I work the night shift here. I wouldn't do this if it wasn't a matter of life and death." Something in his tone made her hesitate. Life and death. Those words carried weight, especially in her industry. "Marcus, it's fine," she said, raising a hand to calm her security chief. 2 minutes, Mr. Reeves. That's all I can spare." Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief. "Not here," he said, glancing around the busy entrance. "What I need to tell you, it needs to be private." Marcus shook his head. "Absolutely not, ma'am. This is a security risk." Natalie studied Daniel's face. There was fear there, yes, but not the kind that suggested malice. It was the raw, unfiltered fear of a person drowning, desperate for a lifeline. "The security office," she decided. "It's right there. And there are cameras." 5 minutes later, Daniel stood across from her in the small, sterile room, clutching a worn manila folder to his chest like armor. Marcus waited by the door, his posture rigid with disapproval. "My daughter Emma is 7 years old," Daniel began, his voice steadier now. 6 months ago, she was diagnosed with Gleason's syndrome." Natalie's breath caught. Gleason's syndrome. A rare, aggressive neurological disorder that primarily affected children. Progressive nerve damage, organ failure, and ultimately death, usually within 2 years of diagnosis. It was also the exact condition that Meridian's new drug, Nurigen, was designed to treat. "Mr. Reeves, I understand your concern, but..." "No, you don't," he interrupted, opening the folder. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning Dr. Malik's office on the research floor. He'd left in a hurry, and these papers were jammed in the shredder." He laid out several fragments of paper that had been carefully taped back together. The Meridian logo was visible at the top of each page. "I shouldn't have looked," Daniel admitted, "but when I saw the word Gleason's, I couldn't help myself. My daughter's life depends on your drug work." Natalie leaned forward, scanning the reconstructed documents. They appeared to be internal test results she had never seen before. "These are the real Phase 3 trial outcomes for Nurigen," Daniel said. "They're completely different from what was submitted to the FDA. The drug doesn't work, Ms. Harrington. Worse than that, it accelerates the progression in nearly 40% of patients." Natalie's world tilted on its axis. The board meeting she was headed to was to announce the final approval of Nurigen before its market launch next month. Billions in investment, years of research, and the company's entire future rode on this drug. And if what Daniel was showing her was true, it wasn't just a failure, it was potentially deadly. "This is absurd," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "These could be early results or from a different formulation, or they could be completely fabricated." Daniel slid another paper forward. "This is Emma's application to join the Expanded Access Program. She's scheduled to receive her first dose next week." His voice broke. "Please, I'm begging you, look into this before more children are hurt." Natalie stared at the photograph clipped to the application form. A smiling little girl with Daniel's eyes and a bright yellow headband, sitting in a hospital bed surrounded by coloring books. Something cracked inside Natalie's carefully constructed professional veneer. "If I'm wrong," Daniel continued, "I'll resign today. I'll walk away and never mention this again. But if I'm right, ... single quotes, the implications hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. If he was right, Meridian was about to release a drug that could kill children instead of saving them, and someone in her company had deliberately hidden that fact. Natalie's mind raced through the possibilities. Dr. Malik had been increasingly nervous in recent meetings. The research division had requested unusual budget allocations. The timeline for submission had been accelerated despite her questions about additional testing. "Who else knows about this?" she asked sharply. "No one," Daniel replied. "I was afraid of what might happen if I went to the wrong person. You built this company. Everyone says you're tough but fair. I thought I hoped you would do the right thing. The right thing. Such a simple phrase for what could be the most difficult decision of her career. The board was waiting. Investors were counting on this approval. Jobs, thousands of them hung in the balance, but so did lives, children's lives. Natalie reached for her phone. Marcus, call security on the research floor. I want Dr. Malik's office sealed immediately. No one goes in or out. She turned to Daniel, her expression hardening into resolve. And you're coming with me to that board meeting, Mr. Reeves. Bring those documents. As they stepped into the elevator, Daniel looked at her with cautious hope. Thank you for listening. Don't thank me yet, Natalie replied. If what you're showing me is accurate, we're about to walk into a hurricane. And if it's not ... single quotes, she left the threat unspoken. The elevator climbed smoothly toward the executive floor. Natalie's mind, usually so focused before crucial meetings, was in turmoil. She thought of her brother Michael, who had died of cancer 10 years ago after an experimental treatment had failed. She had founded Meridian with his insurance money, vowing to create treatments that actually worked, that gave people real hope instead of false promises. Had she failed so completely? Had the company she built with such idealistic fervor become the very thing she had sworn to fight against? The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor through the glass walls of the conference room. Natalie could see the board members already seated, along with Dr. Malik, who was setting up a presentation. They all turned as she stepped out of the elevator, their expressions shifting from impatience to confusion at the sight of a janitor walking alongside their CEO. Ms. Harrington, we've been waiting, began the board chairman. The FDA approval is on hold, Natalie interrupted. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. She placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. This is Daniel Reeves. He has something the entire board needs to see. Dr. Malik's face drained of color. In that moment, before a word was spoken or a document shared, Natalie knew Daniel was right, and the world she had so carefully built was about to come crashing down around her. The boardroom fell silent as Daniel spread the reconstructed documents across the polished mahogany table. 12 pairs of eyes belonging to some of the most powerful people in the pharmaceutical industry moved from the papers to Dr. Malik, whose complexion had taken on a sickly gray hue. Would someone explain why there's a janitor presenting at our approval meeting? Asked Richard Carrington, the oldest board member, his voice sharp with irritation. Natalie stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Miss Reeves discovered what appears to be falsified clinical trial data for Nurg, data that directly contradicts what was submitted to the FDA. She turned to Dr. Malik. Care to explain, Vivek? Dr. Malik adjusted his glasses, buying time. These are obviously preliminary results that were discarded. Rough drafts. Nothing official. His voice lacked conviction. The data we submitted to the FDA represents our final, verified outcomes. Daniel stepped forward. With respect, Dr. Malik, these documents are dated after the FDA submission, and they're marked final analysis, internal review only. This is preposterous. Dr. Malik snapped, regaining some composure. You're going to take the word of a janitor who admits to digging through shredded documents. This is corporate espionage, not whistleblowing. The board chairman, Gregory Wells, cleared his throat. Natalie, while I appreciate your thoroughness, we have investors waiting for this announcement. We're talking about a $4.2 billion market valuation increase once Neurogen is approved. And we're also talking about children's lives. Natalie replied, her voice steel. I founded this company to save lives, not endanger them for profit. Daniel, uncomfortable in the spotlight but driven by desperation, pointed to a specific section of one document. This chart shows that in 38% of test subjects, neurological degradation accelerated after treatment. That's more than double the rate of the placebo group. Dr. Malik slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You can't possibly understand the complexity of this data. You're a janitor whose daughter has Gleason's. Natalie interjected quietly. The room stilled. A janitor who recognized the name of her disease in documents you were trying to destroy. A janitor who was willing to risk his job, his entire livelihood, because he was afraid your drug might hurt more children like his Emma. She turned to the board. I'm calling for an immediate internal investigation and a halt to the FDA approval process. If these documents are authentic, we have a legal and moral obligation to disclose them. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Several members began talking at once, some demanding verification, others insisting they move forward with the approval announcement. This is financial suicide, hissed Janet Moore, head of investor relations. The stock will plummet. We'll face shareholder lawsuits. Better shareholder lawsuits than wrongful death suits, Natalie countered. Gregory Wells raised his hands for silence. Let's approach this rationally, Dr. Malik. Could these documents possibly be authentic? All eyes turned to the research director, who had begun to sweat visibly. He loosened his tie. There may have been some concerning data points in our final analysis, but science is about interpretation. The overall trend showed efficacy, yes or no? Vivek, Natalie demanded. Are these the real results of our phase 3 trials? The silence stretched for 10 excruciating seconds. We adjusted the statistical model to highlight the positive outcomes, he finally admitted. The original data was ... problematic. The admission hung in the air like toxic gas. Daniel felt his knees weakened with horror and vindication. Jesus Christ, muttered the board chairman. Falsified FDA submissions? Do you have any idea what you've done? Dr. Malik's expression hardened. What I've done is try to save this company. Do you know how many promising drugs fail in in Phase 3? We've spent 9 years and over $1 billion developing Neurogen. Without it, Meridian is finished. We all knew the preliminary results weren't ideal. We knew nothing of the sort. Natalie interrupted, her voice deadly quiet. You deliberately kept this from me because you wouldn't have understood. You're not a scientist, Natalie. You're a businesswoman who fancies herself some kind of medical crusader because of what happened to your brother. The room fell silent. Dr. Malik had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Natalie's face went pale, then flushed with anger. Marcus, she called, and her security chief stepped into the room. Please escort Dr. Malik to his office. He is to collect his personal belongings under supervision and then be escorted from the building. His access to all Meridian systems is revoked effective immediately. You can't do this, Doctor, Malik sputtered. I just did, Natalie replied. And when the investigation confirms what you've just admitted, I'll personally see to it that you never work in pharmaceuticals. As Marcus led the protesting doctor away, Natalie turned to the board. I'm calling an emergency press conference for 3 p.m. today. We're going to announce a voluntary hold on Neurogen's approval process pending further review of the clinical data. The stock will crash, warned Janet. Then it crashes, Natalie said firmly. We'll recover from a stock crash. We won't recover from killing children. As the board members filed out, shaken and grim, Daniel remained standing by the table, staring at the documents that had changed everything. What happens now? He asked quietly when they were alone. Natalie sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Now we do a complete review of the actual trial data. If Neurogen is truly harmful, we pull it completely. If there's a subset of patients it might help, we identify them and reformulate our approach. And Emma? The question contained all his fear, all his hope. Natalie met his eyes. She won't receive Neurogen next week. None of the children will. But I promise you this, Mr. Reeves. I will put every resource this company has into finding a real treatment for Gleason's. Starting today. Daniel nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Thank you for believing me. Don't thank me yet, she said, echoing her earlier warning. We have a long road ahead, both of us. She paused. I'd like to meet her. Emma. Something in her tone made Daniel look up sharply. It wasn't just professional concern, he heard. It was something more personal. She's at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, he said. They have a special Gleason's unit. I know St. Margaret's well, Natalie replied softly. My company donates to their research department in memory of my brother. Before Daniel could respond, her assistant appeared at the door. Miss Harrington, the legal team is assembled in conference room B. They need your statement for the press release. Natalie stood. Once again, the composed CEO. I'll be right there. She turned to Daniel. Your job is safe, Mr. Reeves. In fact, I'd like to offer you a position on our new patient advocacy team. We clearly need someone who's willing to speak truth to power. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Even if it means blocking the CEO at the front door. For the first time since his daughter's diagnosis, Daniel felt something like hope unfurl in his chest. I'd like that, he said simply. As they walked toward the door, Natalie asked, why did you really come to me? You could have gone to the press, to regulators. Why risk everything on the chance I'd listen? Daniel considered the question. The night cleaners, we see things. People think we're invisible. For 3 years, I've watched you work late when everyone else has gone home. I've seen the children's hospital donations on your desk. I saw the photo of a young man I'm guessing was your brother. He shrugged. I took a chance that you were still the person who founded this company, not just the person who runs it. Natalie blinked rapidly, turning away so he wouldn't see the emotion in her eyes. Come on, she said after a moment. We have a press conference to prepare for. The press conference was a bloodbath. Standing behind Natalie as she addressed a room packed with stunned reporters, Daniel witnessed firsthand the courage it took to publicly admit that her company's miracle drug, the one that had been heralded as Meridian's crowning achievement, might be dangerous. She didn't name Dr. Malik or mention the falsified data directly, citing the ongoing investigation, but she was unflinching in her commitment to transparency. Patient safety is non-negotiable, she stated, her voice steady despite the flashing cameras and aggressive question. Until we are 100% confident in Neurogen's efficacy and safety profile, we cannot in good conscience move forward with its release. Within minutes of the announcement, Meridian's stock began its freefall. The financial news tickers running along the bottom of the screens in the lobby told the brutal story. Down 18%, then 27%, then 34%. By closing bell, Meridian Pharmaceuticals had lost nearly $3 billion in market value. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Meridian Tower wearing a suit that had been tucked away in the back of his closet since his wife's funeral 4 years ago. It felt too tight across the shoulders and too loose around the waist. A physical reminder of how much had changed. The security guard who had ignored him every night for 3 years now examined his new temporary ID badge with exaggerated scrutiny. Patient advocacy consultant, the guard read aloud. Eyebrows raised. Quite a promotion from pushing a mop, huh? Daniel didn't rise to the bait. Is Miss Harrington in yet? The guard snorted. Been in since 5 a.m. Damage control. Half the board's calling for her head. Natalie's assistant, a razor-sharp woman named Vanessa, met Daniel at the elevator and escorted him to a small office on the executive. It was nothing fancy, just a desk, computer, and visitor's chair, but the window offered a view of the city that took his breath away. This can't be right, he said, turning to Vanessa. Miss, Harrington insisted. Vanessa handed him a tablet. Here's your schedule. Briefing with legal at 10, lunch with the patient advocacy director at noon. And Ms. Harrington will meet you at 2 p.m. to go to the hospital. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and information. The legal team treated him with cautious respect, like a bomb that might detonate if mishandled. The advocacy director, a warm woman named Dr. Patel, explained how his role would bridge the gap between patients' experiences and corporate decision-making. By the time Natalie appeared at his door, Daniel's head was spinning. "Ready?" she asked simply. He nodded, reaching for his jacket. "Are you sure this is a good idea, you visiting Emma?" "No," Natalie admitted as they rode the elevator down. "It's probably a terrible idea. The board is in crisis mode. Investors are panicking, and I should be putting out fires. But some things matter more." Outside, her driver held the door to a sleek black town car. As they settled into the leather seats, Daniel noticed the dark circles under Natalie's eyes, carefully concealed but visible in the natural light. "You haven't slept," he observed. "Neither have you," he shrugged. "I'm used to it. Night shift for 3 years, plus hospital visits with Emma." The car moved smoothly through traffic. Natalie stared out the window. "How did you end up working nights? That can't be easy as a single parent." "It's not," Daniel admitted. "But when Angela Emmons' wife died, we had no insurance. Medical bills wiped out our savings. Night shift pays better, and Mrs. Abernathy next door watches Emma when I work. During the day I can be with her dot," single quotes. He paused. "At least I could before the hospitalization started." Natalie nodded, saying nothing. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but weighted with unspoken understanding. St. Margaret's Children's Hospital was a modern facility, its lobby bright with colorful murals and interactive playstations. Daniel led Natalie past the main reception area to the specialized neurology wing on the 3rd floor. "They know you're coming," he explained. "I called ahead." Emma's excited. She's been following the Neurogen news. She understands what's happening. "More than most adults," Daniel said, a hint of pride breaking through his exhaustion. "She reads everything she can about her condition. Says she's going to be a neurologist when she grows up to help kids like her." The words hung between them, both refusing to acknowledge the terrible reality that without an effective treatment, Emma might not grow up at all. Room 312 was decorated with bright yellow paper stars hanging from the ceiling and a hand-painted sign that read Emma's Universe. Inside, a small figure sat cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by books and a tablet computer. "Daddy," Emma's face lit up as they entered. She was tiny for 7, her frame delicate, with Daniel's warm brown eyes and a yellow headband holding back dark curls. An IV line ran to her arm, and Daniel noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she set aside her tablet, a symptom of the neurological progression that twisted his heart each time he saw it. "Hey, Starlight," he said, bending to kiss her forehead. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Ms. Harrington. She's the CEO of the company working on medicines for..." Emma's eyes widened. "The Neurogen lady," she breathed, then frowned. "But you stopped it. Was it because it was bad medicine?" Natalie blinked, taken aback by the direct question. She moved closer to the bed. "Yes," she answered honestly. "We found out it might not help people the way we thought it would." Emma nodded solemnly. "My doctor said some medicines can make you worse instead of better. Are you going to make a different medicine now?" Natalie sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "We're going to try. Your dad is helping us." "Really?" Emma looked at her father with new respect. "Really?" Natalie confirmed. "He's the one who helped us discover the truth about Neurogen. He's very brave, single quotes. Emma beamed. "I know. He's the bravest daddy in the world." She turned back to Natalie, studying her with the intense curiosity unique to children. "Your eyes are sad. Is it because your medicine didn't work?" Daniel started to intervene. "Emma, that's not polite," but Natalie shook her head. "It's all right," she told him, then looked back at Emma. "Yes, I'm sad about the medicine. I wanted it to help children like you." Emma reached out and patted Natalie's hand. "That's okay. My mom used to say that making mistakes is how you learn to do better next time." Natalie's composed expression faltered for just a moment. "Your mom sounds very wise." "She was," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She's in heaven now, but she still helps me when I'm scared." She pointed to the yellow stars hanging from the ceiling. "Like those." Yellow was her favorite color. "When I see yellow things, I know she's watching out." Daniel saw Natalie swallow hard. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small yellow journal with a silver pen. "I brought you something," she said. "Your dad mentioned you'd like to learn about medicine. This is a research notebook, just like the ones our scientists use. Maybe you can write down your ideas for us." Emma took the journal reverently, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "My own research book," she whispered. She looked up at Natalie with shining eyes. "Thank you." Before either adult could respond, the door opened and a nurse entered with a medication tray. "Time for your afternoon treatment, Miss Emma," she announced cheerfully, then noticed Natalie. Her eyes widened in recognition. "We should go," Daniel said quickly, sensing the sudden tension. "Emma needs her rest." Emma's face fell. "But you just got here." "I'll come back tonight," he promised. "And maybe Miss Harrington can visit again sometime." "I'd like that very much," Natalie said, her voice soft. "If it's okay with you, Emma." Emma nodded eagerly. "Next time I'll show you my star map. I'm charting all the constellations." As they left the room, the nurse followed them into the hallway, her expression troubled. "Mr. Reeves, Dr. Winters wants to speak with you. There's been some ... confusion about Emma's treatment plan." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of confusion?" The nurse glanced nervously at Natalie. "In light of the Neurogen announcement, the hospital's ethics committee has put all Gleason's treatments under review. They're concerned about protocol." "What does that mean for Emma?" Daniel demanded. "It means," Natalie interjected, understanding immediately that the hospital is afraid of liability. They're distancing themselves from anything connected to Meridian. She turned to the nurse. Please tell Dr. Winters that Natalie Harrington would like to join that conversation. Dr. Winters' office was a stark contrast to Emma's colorful room, all muted grays and clinical white, with framed medical degrees dominating one wall. The neurologist himself matched his surrounding, tall, lean, and gray-haired, with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually furrowed brow. He looked up from his computer with undisguised surprise when Natalie followed Daniel into the room. Ms. Harrington, this is ... unexpected. He stood, extending a hand. I wasn't aware you were personally involved in Emma's case. I am now, Natalie replied, her handshake firm and brief. Mr. Reeves is working with Meridian on our patient advocacy initiative. I understand there's some concern about Emma's treatment plan. Dr. Winters gestured for them to sit, his expression carefully neutral. Yes. In light of Meridian's announcement about Neurogen, the hospital's ethics committee has flagged all Gleason's cases for review. Standard protocol when a treatment pathway is called into question. And what does that mean for my daughter? Daniel asked, the edge in his voice betraying his fear. Dr. Winters sighed. The existing treatment isn't very effective, as you know. It only slows progression slightly. Emma was scheduled to be part of the Neurogen Expanded Access Program. Now that's been suspended. We need alternatives, Natalie stated. What other options are available for Emma? That's just it, Doctor. Winters said, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. There aren't many. The current standard of care is the best we have. Research into Gleason's is chronically underfunded because it's so rare. Neurogen was the first real hope we'd had in decades. Daniel leaned forward. So what are you saying? We just wait and watch her get worse? The doctor's expression softened with genuine sympathy. Mr. Reeves, I wish I had better news. We'll continue with the standard protocol, manage her symptoms as best we can, and hope for. No, Natalie interrupted. That's not acceptable. Both men turned to her, startled by the steel in her voice. Excuse me, Doctor, Winters blinked. I said that's not acceptable, Natalie repeated, her posture shifting from concerned visitor to commanding CEO in an instant. Meridian employs some of the most brilliant medical researchers in the world. Our focus on Gleason's isn't going away just because Neurogen failed. If anything, it's intensifying. She pulled out her tablet and opened a calendar. I'm arranging a meeting next week with our top neurological researchers and the leading Gleason specialists globally. I'd like you to attend, Dr. Winters. Your expertise would be valuable. The doctor looked bewildered. I appreciate the invitation, but one meeting won't produce a miracle treatment. No, but it will align the best minds on the problem, Natalie countered. And in the meantime, I want to ensure Emma and the other Gleason's patients here have access to the most advanced supportive care available. The cost would be billed to Meridian. Natalie finished for him. Consider it part of our ongoing research initiative. I'll have legal draw up the agreements this afternoon, Doctor. Winters stared at her, clearly trying to process this sudden development. That's extraordinarily generous, Ms. Harrington. It's not generosity, replied. It's responsibility. These children were counting on our drug. We failed them. Now we owe them our best effort to make it right. Daniel watched this exchange with growing amazement. The woman sitting beside him, confidently rewriting the rules, refusing to accept defeats, seemed worlds away from the shocked CEO who had listened to his desperate plea just yesterday. So Emma stays on her current medication? He asked, bringing the conversation back to his immediate concern. Dr. Winters nodded. Yes, but with enhanced monitoring and supportive therapies that, frankly, most insurance wouldn't cover. He looked at Natalie. If Meridian is serious about funding this, it could significantly improve her quality of life while research continues. We're serious, Natalie assured him. She turned to Daniel. Is this acceptable to you? The question caught him off guard. In the medical odyssey of Emma's illness, no one had ever asked for his approval of a plan, only his consent to what they'd already decided. Yes, he said simply. Yes, he said simply. As they left the hospital, Daniel was quiet, processing everything that had happened. In the car, he finally spoke. Why are you doing all this? The press conference, hiring me, visiting Emma, now funding her care, ... You don't even know us. Natalie gazed out the window, her expression distant. When I was 12, my brother Michael was diagnosed with leukemia. Our parents spent everything they had on experimental treatments that the doctors promised would save him. Each one failed, but they kept pushing the next miracle cure. Her voice remained steady, but her hands tightened in her lap. Michael died when he was 14. I was 16. I'm sorry, Daniel said softly. I founded Meridian with the insurance money when I was 28, she continued. The mission was simple. Create treatments that actually work, with rigorous science and absolute transparency. A bitter smile crossed her face. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I became so focused on growth and innovation that I stopped asking the hard questions. She turned to look at him directly. You reminded me why I started this company. Your courage yesterday, ... It was a wake-up call I desperately needed, ... single quotes before Daniel could respond. Natalie's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and grimaced. The board chairman. Again, she silenced the call. That's the 5th time today. Are they really calling for your resignation? Some are, she acknowledged. Gregory and a few others see yesterday's announcement as a betrayal of shareholder interest. They wanted me to bury the Neurogen problems and deal with them quietly after approval. Would that have been legal, technically? Ethically? Absolutely not. She shook her head. We have an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. I suspect it will be ... unpleasant. The car pulled up outside Meridian Tower. As they stepped into the lobby, Natalie was immediately surrounded by executives and assistants, all clutching tablets and speaking urgently. She held up a hand, silencing them. Everything except genuine emergencies can wait until tomorrow, she told them. Reeves and I need to review the Gleason's research files. She turned to Daniel. Unless you need to get home? Mrs. Abernathy is staying with Emma tonight, he said. I'm free. Hours later, they sat in Natalie's office amid stacks of research papers and empty takeout containers. The city lights glittered beyond the floor to ceiling windows as Daniel rubbed his eyes, vision blurring from reading countless medical studies. There's a pattern here, Natalie said, circling something on a printout. Neurogen targeted the BRCA4 protein pathway, but these studies suggest the real problem might be upstream, in the GNT3 receptor. Daniel blinked at her. I have no idea what that means. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It means Malik's team might have been working on the wrong target all along. She shuffled through more papers. There's a researcher at Johns Hopkins who's been studying GNT-3 in relation to other neurologics. We should reach out to her. Dr. Winters said Gleason's research is underfunded because it's rare, Daniel. That's the conventional wisdom, Natalie agreed. But rare diseases often share mechanisms with common ones. Breakthroughs for Gleason's could lead to treatments for more prevalent conditions. She made another note. Problem is time. Traditional drug development takes years. And Emma and the other children don't have years. Daniel's throat tightened at the stark truth of her words. How long do you think she has? Natalie set down her pen, meeting his gaze directly. Based on her current progression rate, 18 months? Maybe 2 years. When he flinched, she reached across the table and gripped his hand. But Daniel, that estimate assumes nothing changes, no new treatments, no breakthroughs. I refuse to accept that as our only scenario. The warmth of her hand on his, the fierce determination in her eyes. It kindled something in Daniel's chest that he'd thought had died with Angela. Hope. So what's our next step, he asked. Natalie squeezed his hand once more before releasing. Tomorrow I fight for control of my company, and then we build a new research team, the best minds. Unlimited resources and a single focus, finding a treatment that works. Not in 10 years. Not in 5. Now. And if the board ousts you, she smiled grimly, then I start a new company with my personal fortune and do exactly the same thing. Either way, I'm not giving up on Emma or any of the other children. That's a promise. The boardroom had never felt so hostile. Natalie sat at the head of the table, back straight, expression impassive as she faced 12 board members whose emotions ranged from simmering anger to outright hostility. Only 3 Dr. Patel, the patient advocacy director, James Wong, the company's longest-serving member, and Diane Forrester, the former surgeon who'd joined 2 years ago, showed anything resembling support. Gregory Wells, the board chairman, called the emergency meeting to order with barely concealed contempt. We're here to address the unilateral action taken by Ms. Harrington regarding Neurogen, he began, emphasizing her title to subtly undermine her authority, an action that has cost this company nearly $3 billion in market value in less than 48 hours. Natalie didn't flinch. I'm aware of the financial impact, are you? Janet Moore, head of investor relations, pushed a tablet across the table. These are the emails I've received from our top 10 institutional investors. They're using words like betrayal and incompetence. I'd prefer those words to negligent homicide, Natalie replied coolly, which is what we'd be facing if we'd released Neurogen knowing it could harm patients. We could have handled this internally, Gregory insisted. Delayed the launch quietly, conducted additional tests. Instead, you held a public execution of our flagship drug. Transparency was the only ethical option, Natalie countered. And may I remind the board that Dr. Malik admitted to falsifying critical safety data? The investigation has already confirmed the authenticity of the documents, Miss Reeves discussed. Yes. Mr. Reeves. Richard Carrington's voice dripped with disdain. The janitor you've mysteriously elevated to an executive position. Perhaps you could explain that particular decision. Natalie met his gaze steadily. Daniel Reeves represents exactly the perspective this company's been missing. Someone who understands what's at stake for patients and families. His insight has already proven invaluable. His daughter has Gleason's, Dr. Patel added. He brings lived experience to our patient advocacy work. How convenient, Janet muttered. James Wong, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. I've reviewed the Neurogen data personally, both the falsified reports and the actual results. His voice carried the weight of his 4 decades in pharmaceutical development. Ms. Harrington made the only defensible decision. Had we proceeded with FDA approval based on fraudulent data, the consequences would have been catastrophic legally, financially, and morally. Thank you, James, Natalie said. The question now is how we move forward. Gregory leaned forward. That's precisely why we've called this. The board has lost confidence in your leadership, Natalie. Your judgment has been compromised by personal factors. Personal factors? Natalie repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Your history with your brother's illness, your apparent attachment to the Reeves girl. You're making emotional decisions rather than business ones. Natalie took a measured breath. If by emotional decisions you mean refusing to profit from a drug that could harm children, then yes, I'm guilty. But I would argue that ethical leadership is precisely what Meridian needs right now. Noble sentiment sentiments, Gregory said dismissively, but they don't address the reality of our situation. We have shareholders to answer to. We also have patients to answer to, Natalie shot back. Patients who trust us with their lives. Gregory exchanged glances with several board members. We've prepared a resolution, he announced. We propose a restructuring of leadership, with you stepping into a chairman emeritus role, while operations are taken over by an interim CEO until a permanent replacement can be found. A cold silence fell over the room. This was it, the coup she'd been expecting. I see, Natalie said, her voice betraying nothing. And who would this interim CEO be? Me, Gregory replied. With Janet as coup. We've already drafted a transition plan and a press release, explaining that you're stepping back to focus on the company's long-term research vision. How thoughtful. Natalie's smile didn't reach her eyes. She opened a folder she'd brought with her and slid documents across the table to each board member. Before we vote on your resolution, you might want to review these. Gregory frowned, scanning the page. His face paled. What is this? The results of an investigation I commissioned 6 months ago, Natalie explained. When I first suspected irregularities in the Neurogen development process, I discreetly hired an independent firm to trace all communications related to the project. She stood, walking slowly around the table. Page 3 shows email exchanges between Dr. Malik and 4 board members, discussing ways to manage problematic data and accelerate the approval timeline despite setbacks. Page 5 details meetings that were deliberately kept off the official calendar. Page 7 shows text messages explicitly acknowledging the safety concerns while planning to conceal them. Gregory's hands shook slightly. This is a fabrication. It's authenticated by 3 separate digital forensics experts, Natalie countered. And there are copies with my lawyers, the FBI's healthcare fraud division, and in a secure server that will automatically send the contents to major news outlets if anything happens to me or if I'm removed from my position. She returned to her seat, her voice steady. So yes, let's vote on your resolution. But understand that if I'm removed, my first call as a private citizen will be to federal prosecutors. The room erupted in chaotic crosstalk. Janet appeared on the verge of tears. Richard Carrington was shouting about extortion. Through it all, Natalie remained perfectly calm, like the eye of a hurricane. When the noise finally subsided, Gregory's face had gone from pale to ashen. What do you want? I want to save this company, Natalie replied simply. Not just its stock price, but its soul. I want to return to the mission we've strayed from, creating treatments that genuinely help patients. She distributed another document. This is my proposal. Meridian will establish a new division focused exclusively on Gleason's and related rare neurological disorders. It will operate with complete transparency, with patient advocates involved at every stage. We'll partner with leading academic institutions to accelerate research. The cost would be astronomical, Janet protested weakly. Initially, yes, Natalie agreed, but the long-term benefits, both humanitarian and financial, could be significant. Breakthroughs in rare disease mechanisms often lead to treatments for more common conditions. Dr. Patel nodded enthusiastically. This approach aligns with emerging trends in personalized medicine, could position Meridian as a leader in the field. I'm not asking for the board's permission, Natalie said quietly. I'm informing you of the company's new direction. Those who share this vision are welcome to remain. Those who don't, ... Single quotes, she let the sentence hang unfinished in the air. The vote, when it finally came, was 9-3 in favor of Natalie's continued leadership. Gregory, Janet, and Richard abstained, their faces masks of barely contained fury. As the board members filed out, James Wong lingered. That was quite a performance, he said, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. How much of that investigation was real? Natalie's lips curved in a small smile. Enough to make my point. And the rest? Sometimes the appearance of leverage is as effective as actual leverage. She gathered her papers. I learned that from you, James. The old man chuckled. I've never been prouder of a student, but you've made powerful enemies today. I know, Natalie acknowledged, but I've also remembered who I am and why I built this company. She found Daniel waiting in her office, pacing nervously. He stopped when she entered, searching her face for clues. Well, he asked. I'm still CEO, she replied, setting down her files. And we have approval to create a dedicated Gleason's research division with generous funding. Relief washed over his face. That's incredible. How did you manage it? Politics, she said vaguely, and a well-timed bluff. She sank into her chair, suddenly looking exhausted. But it's just the beginning. We have an enormous amount of work ahead of us. Daniel nodded, his expression turning serious. About that, I've been thinking about my role here. Having second thoughts? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. The opposite, actually. He sat across from her. I want to do more than just attend meetings and review patient materials. I want to be directly involved in the research effort. Natalie raised an eyebrow. You don't have a scientific background. No, he admitted, but I have something the researchers don't exude, personal motivation to find a solution. I've spent every night for the past 6 months learning everything I can about Gleason's. I've read every study, every article, joined every patient forum. I know this disease intimately, not just as data points, but as the enemy stealing my daughter's future. Natalie studied him thoughtfully. What exactly are you proposing? Let me be the bridge between the scientists and the patients, Daniel said. Let me ask the questions they might not think to ask. Push for answers when they might accept delays. Let me be the voice that keeps reminding everyone what's at stake. A slow smile spread across Natalie's face. Patient research liaison, she said. It's not a position that exists yet, but I think we just invented it. Outside her office windows, the lights of the city blinked on as dusk descended. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition that they were no longer just CEO and employee, not just two people thrown together by circumstance, but partners in a mission that mattered more than either of them had dared to hope. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The newly established Gleason's Research Initiative took over an entire floor of Meridian Tower, with teams of scientists recruited from leading institutions around the world. Daniel's position as patient research liaison quickly evolved from a symbolic title to a vital role. He attended every research meeting, asking the questions others missed, and pushing back when scientists drifted into abstractions that lost sight of the urgent human need. 2 years isn't acceptable, he said firmly during one heated discussion about research timeline. My daughter doesn't have 2 years. None of these children do. The lead scientist, Dr. Eleanor Chun, a brilliant neurologist poached from Johns Hopkins, nodded thoughtfully. You're right. We need to reconsider our approach. She turned to her team. What if we pivot to examining existing approved compounds that might be repurposed? The safety profiles are already established, which could cut years off the development process. This became the patent Daniel's unwavering focus on immediate, practical solutions, pushing the scientific team to think differently, to abandon conventional wisdom when it didn't serve their urgent timeline. In the daily chaos of the initiative, Natalie and Daniel developed a seamless working relationship. They communicated in half sentences, anticipating each other's thoughts, challenging each other when necessary, and providing support when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Their days started early and ended late, often sharing takeout dinner in one of their offices while reviewing the day's research developments. The rest of Meridian watched this partnership with reactions ranging from admiration to resentment. The story of the janitor who had stopped the CEO at the door had spread throughout the company, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Some saw Daniel as a hero, others as an opportunist. A few executives openly questioned his rapid rise, suggesting inappropriate motives behind Natalie's apparent favoritism. Let them talk, Natalie said dismissively when Daniel mentioned the whispers he'd overheard. I stopped caring about office gossip the day you showed me those documents. Despite the intense work pace, Daniel visited Emma every day, sometimes for only half an hour between meetings, sometimes sitting by her bed late into the night. Natalie joined him twice a week, bringing research updates disguised as stories and small yellow gifts that made Emma's face light up. The yellow journal Natalie had given Emma was now filled with the girl's neat handwriting observations about her symptoms, questions for the doctors, and meticulously detailed drawings of what she imagined her nerve cells looked like. Dr. Chun had been astonished by the 7-year-old's intuitive understanding of her condition. She's got a researcher's mind, the doctor had remarked after reviewing Emma's notes. Some of her questions are ones we should be asking ourselves. But while the research accelerated, Emma's condition steadily declined. The tremors in her hands worsened. She tired more easily. Occasionally, her speech slurred when she was fatigued. Each new symptom was like a knife in Daniel's heart, sharpening his determination but also his fear. One evening, 6 weeks after the formation of the Gleason's Initiative, Natalie found Daniel alone in the research lab, staring at a wall of complex molecular diagrams. It's almost midnight, she said softly. You should go home. Get some rest. Single quotes. Daniel didn't turn around. I can't stop thinking about something Emma said today. She asked if the stars would look different from heaven. His voice broke on the last word. Natalie moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. What did you tell her? I told her she wouldn't need to find out for a very long time. He finally looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and suppressed tears. I lied to my daughter, Natalie, because I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. That we're not moving fast enough. Daniel, no, it's true. We both know it. He gestured at the diagrams. We've made incredible progress. But incredible isn't enough. Dr. Chun says they're close to identifying potential compounds for testing. But close could still mean months. He ran a hand through his hair. Emma had another seizure today, her third this week. Natalie's face fell. You didn't tell me. You were in back-to-back meetings with investors. There was nothing you could have done. I could have been there, she said quietly. And for both of you, the simple statement, the genuine care in her voice broke something in Daniel. The wall he'd carefully maintained between his professional determination and his private terror crumbled. His shoulders shook as silent sobs overtook him. Without hesitation, Natalie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He leaned into her embrace, allowing himself just for a moment to be held up by someone else's strength. I can't lose her, he whispered against Natalie's shoulder. She's all I have. Natalie held him tighter. I know, and we're not going to let that happen. She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes with fierce determination. Promise you, Daniel. We will find a way. They stood there in the empty lab, two people connected by something deeper than a shared mission, a profound understanding of each other's pain and purpose. The next morning, Natalie called an emergency meeting of the research team. She arrived carrying a stack of folders and a renewed sense of urgency. We need to think outside conventional parameters, she announced without preamble. The traditional research pathway isn't moving fast enough. Dr. Chun frowned. We've already accelerated beyond anything I've seen in my career. It's still not enough. Natalie insisted. She distributed the folders. These are proposals for 3 parallel research tracks. The first continues our current approach with increased resource. The second explores compassionate use exceptions for promising compounds that haven't completed full clinical trials. The third ... single quotes, she paused. The third is more controversial ... single quotes. Daniel opened his folder and scanned the document inside. His eyes widened. Natalie, this is a research partnership with Dr. Sanjay Kapoor at the Bangalore Neurological Institute, she finished for him. His work on experimental gene therapy for neurologic disorders is years ahead of anything in the US, but it hasn't gone through FDA protocol. Dr. Chun looked alarmed. That's because his methods wouldn't be approved here. The risk profile is significant, Natalie acknowledged, but so is the potential benefit, Dr. Kapoor has successfully treated 3 patients with conditions similar to Gleason's using targeted genetic modification techniques. 3 patients isn't a clinical trial, another scientist objected. It's anecdotal at best. I'm not suggesting we adopt his methods wholesale, Natalie clarified. I'm proposing we bring him here as a consultant, integrate his knowledge with our more rigorous protocols, and see if we can develop a hybrid approach that maintains safety while accelerating results. The room erupted in debate. Daniel remained silent, studying the proposal, his mind racing with both hope and apprehension. Natalie caught his eye across the table, a silent question in her gaze. He gave a small nod. Any chance, no matter how slim or controversial, was better than watching Emma slip away day by day. When the meeting concluded, most of the team had cautiously agreed to explore all 3 pathways, with Dr. Chun expressing serious reservations about the Kapoor collaboration. As the scientists filed out, Daniel approached Natalie. How did you find Kapoor? He asked. I've had a team searching globally for unconventional Gleason's research since day 1, she replied. His name came up repeatedly in obscure medical journals, always with asterisks about methodological concerns. But his results, ... single quotes. She shook her head in wonder. If they're legitimate, he's achieved something remarkable. And if they're not, Natalie's expression turned grim. Then we'll have wasted precious time and resources. It's a gamble, I know. But at this point, ... she didn't need to finish the sentence. At this point, they were running out of options. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat beside Emma's hospital bed, reading her favorite story while she dozed. The yellow journal lay open on her lap, a half-finished entry trailing off mid-sentence where fatigue had overcome her determination. Through the window, he could see Natalie in the hallway, engaged in an intense phone conversation, presumably with Dr. Kapoor in India. As he watched her passionate gestures, her absolute focus, Daniel was struck by how completely she had committed herself to this fight, not just professionally but personally. Somewhere along the way, Emma had become more than a patient to her, and Daniel had become more than an employee. Dr. Sanjay Kapoor arrived at Meridian Tower on a rainy Tuesday morning, a compact man with sharp eyes and an air of quiet confidence that immediately commanded respect. Within hours, he had transformed the research lab's atmosphere from cautious optimism to electric intensity. He worked alongside Dr. Chun and her team 18 hours a day, pushing boundaries, challenging assumptions, and bringing a perspective so novel it left even the most experienced researchers reeling. It's not about blocking the disease progression, he explained during his first presentation. That's the Western approach. Fight, resist, contain. My method embraces a different philosophy: redirect the body's energy, teach the cells a new way to function. His theoretical framework was unorthodox, blending cutting-edge genetic manipulation with principles drawn from both quantum cellular biology and ancient Ayurvedic understanding of neural pathways. Some of the scientists initially dismissed his ideas as pseudoscientific, but the data from his 3 successfully treated patients couldn't be ignored. 2 weeks after his arrival, the combined research team had developed a hybrid treatment protocol that merged Kapoor's innovative techniques with Meridian's rigorous safety standards. They called it Protocol NX7, and the preliminary lab results were nothing short of extraordinary. The neural tissue samples show 87% recovery of function, Dr. Chun reported in the daily briefing, her usual scientific reserve cracking to reveal barely contained excitement. We've never seen anything like this. Natalie, who had been attending every briefing, looked at Daniel. The question didn't need to be spoken aloud. How soon? Daniel asked. Dr. Chun and Dr. Kapoor exchanged glances. The protocol still needs refinement, Doctor. Chun began cautiously. 2 weeks, Doctor. Kapoor interjected. With accelerated testing, we could be ready for human trials in 2 weeks. That's incredibly aggressive, Doctor. Chun objected. It's necessary, Kapoor countered. These children don't have the luxury of traditional timelines. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood the stakes, the delicate balance between urgency and safety. What about compassionate use? Natalie asked. Could we seek FDA approval for a single-patient trial under those provisions? Dr. Chun frowned. Possibly, but it would still require significant documentation and review. We're talking months, not weeks. Daniel felt a familiar desperation rising in his chest. Last night, Emma had struggled to hold her favorite pencil, her fingers refusing to cooperate. Another small loss in an accelerating series. What if we don't wait for FDA approval? The words escaped before he could filter them, hanging in the air like a challenge. The scientist stared at him in shock. Natalie's expression remained carefully neutral. Daniel, Doctor, Chun said gently. I understand your frustration, but no, you don't, he interrupted. With all respect, you can't. None of you watch your child disappear a little more every day. He turned to Dr. Kapoor. You developed your treatment outside the U.S. regulatory system. How? Kapoor met his gaze steadily. In Bangalore, we operate under different guidelines. The Institute has special research exemptions for terminal conditions where no other options exist. And those 3 patients you treated, they're really in remission? Complete reversal of symptoms in 2 cases. Kapoor confirmed. The 3rd shows continued improvement. Daniel looked at Natalie. What if we took Emma to India? The room fell silent. The question wasn't just about logistics, it was about crossing a line, abandoning the careful protocols they'd established. Natalie didn't respond. When she did, her voice was measured. Let's discuss this privately. After the meeting dispersed, she led Daniel to her office and closed the door. For a long moment, she stood at the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. It would be illegal, she said finally. Not just bending regulations, explicitly illegal. Taking an experimental treatment developed in U.S. labs to another country to circumvent FDA oversight. I know, Daniel acknowledged. Meridian could face crippling sanction. I could face criminal charges. I know that too. Natalie turned to face him. And yet you're still asking. I'm asking because she's dying, Natalie. His voice was raw with emotion. Every other option takes too long. You've seen her latest scans. The progression is accelerating. Natalie sank into her chair, rubbing her temples. There has to be a better way. Some legal pathway we haven't considered. I've looked at every option, Daniel said. We all have. There isn't one. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. I'll resign from Meridian. Take full responsibility. Say I stole the research. Whatever it takes to protect you and the company. That's not... Natalie stopped, shaking her head. Daniel, no. That's not even an option. Then what is? She was silent for a long moment, her brilliant mind visibly working through scenarios, weighing risks and consequences. Finally, she pressed a button on her desk phone. Vanessa, please ask Dr. Kapoor to come to my office and clear my schedule for the rest of the day. She looked up at Daniel. This conversation isn't over, but we need more information before we can make any decisions. An hour later, the 3 of them sat in Natalie's office, the remnants of lunch forgotten as Dr. Kapoor outlined possibilities. His institute in Bangalore could theoretically accommodate Emma as a patient, but transferring the specific protocol developed at Meridian would be complicated. The equipment, the specialized compounds, they would need to be shipped separately. Through various channels, he explained. It would raise flags. What about another location? Natalie asked. Somewhere with less regulatory oversight but closer proximity? There's a private research facility in Mexico that I've collaborated with, Kapoor said thoughtfully. They have most of the necessary equipment, and the border crossing would be simpler. Daniel looked between them, hardly daring to hope. Are we really considering this? We're exploring all options, Natalie said carefully. Nothing more at this point. When Dr. Kapoor left, promising to make discreet inquiries about the Mexican facility, Natalie turned back to Daniel. I need to be absolutely clear about something, she said, her expression grave. And this is still a massive, if we pursue this route, it would be completely outside of Meridian. No company resources, no official connection. I would take personal responsibility. Natalie, I can't let you risk. It's not your decision, she interrupted. Emma means something to me too, Daniel. These past weeks, watching her fight, seeing her courage, she's changed me, her voice softened, and so have you. The intensity in her eyes made Daniel's breath catch. There had been moments between them, shared glances, casual touches that lingered, late nights when conversation drifted from research to more personal territories, but neither had acknowledged the subtle shift in their relationship. Why? He asked simply. Why would you risk everything? Natalie looked away, uncharacteristically vulnerable. After Michael died, I built walls. Around my heart, around my life. Everything became about the company, about proving something. You and Emma, single quotes. She smiled faintly. You reminded me there are things worth fighting for beyond balance sheets and stock prices. Daniel reached across the desk and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Whatever we decide, he said, we decide together. The moment was interrupted by Natalie's phone. She glanced at the screen, then answered with a frown. Dr. Chun? What is it? Daniel could hear the agitation in the scientist's voice even from across the desk. Natalie's expression grew increasingly concerned. When? She asked sharply. Who else knows? After a pause, she said, lock down the lab. No one enter out until I get there. She hung up and stood abrupt. What's happened? Daniel asked, alarm rising. Someone broke into the lab last night, Natalie said, already moving toward the door. They copied research files and took samples of the NX7 compound. Who would? Daniel began, then understanding dawned. Gregory, the board members who opposed you. Natalie nodded grimly. This has corporate espionage written all over it. If they're trying to replicate our work or sell it to competitors, single quote, she didn't need to finish the sentence. If their research was compromised, everything could fall apart. The treatment, Emma's chance, all of it. The research floor was in chaos. Security personnel interviewed scientists while forensic IT specialists combed through computer systems. Dr. Chun paced anxiously near the main lab doors, her normally composed demeanor shattered. 3 external hard drives are missing, she reported as Natalie and Daniel approached, and samples of the latest NX7 formulation, enough for preliminary human testing. Show me the security footage, Natalie demanded. In the small security office, they watched grainy video of a figure in a lab coat entering the secure area at 2:14 a.m. using a valid access card. The person moved with confidence, clearly familiar with the lab layout and security protocols. They kept their face angled away from cameras, methodically collecting samples and downloading files. That's not an outside job, Daniel said. That's someone who works here. Natalie's expression hardened. The access card, whose was it? The security officer checked the logs. Dr. Aaron Reynolds. He's a junior researcher on Dr. Chun's team. Bring him in, Natalie ordered. Now, 30 minutes later, a visibly nervous doctor. Reynolds sat across from them in a conference room, barely 30, with rumpled clothes and anxious eyes. He looked more like a graduate student than a corporate spy. I don't understand, he stammered. My card was in my wallet all night. I was home with my wife. Your card accessed the lab at 2:14 a.m., Natalie stated coldly. The system doesn't lie. Someone must have cloned it, Reynolds insisted. I would never. Who approached you? Daniel interrupted, his voice gentler than Natalie. Was it Gregory? Janet? Someone from outside Meridian? Reynolds' eyes widened. No one, I swear. Daniel studied him, then turned to Natalie. I believe him. Look at his hands. They're shaking. He's terrified, not guilty. Natalie considered this, then nodded slowly. If your card was cloned, that narrows the suspects considerably. Only certain people in IT security have that capability. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text from James Wong. * emergency meeting called by Gregory. 1 hour. You need to be there. *. She showed Daniel the message. This isn't a coincidence. What are they planning? Daniel wondered. We're about to find out. She stood. Dr. Reynolds, you're not being accused, but I need you to remain available for questions. They left him looking relieved but bewildered. We need a backup plan, Daniel said as they hurried toward the elevator. If they stole the research, they could block us from using it. I'm already ahead of you. Natalie punched the button for the executive floor. I had Dr. Kapoor secure his original research notes and formulations. They may have stolen our refined version, but they don't have the foundational knowledge that made it possible. Will that be enough? It has to be. The boardroom was already half full when they arrived. Gregory Wells sat at the head of the table, Natalie's seat, with a self-satisfied smile that vanished when he saw Daniel. This is a closed board meeting, he said sharply. Mr. Reeves isn't authorized to attend. Mr. Reeves is my senior advisor on the Gleason's initiative, Natalie replied, taking a seat directly opposite Gregory. Anything discussed regarding that project requires his presence. Gregory's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. As the remaining board members filed in, Daniel noticed Janet Moore avoiding eye contact, while Richard Carrington's face was flushed with barely contained triumph. Once everyone was seated, Gregory cleared his throat. I've called this emergency meeting to address a serious breach of corporate governance. It has come to our attention that Ms. Harrington has been developing a radical, untested treatment for Gleason's syndrome with the intention of bypassing FDA regulations. Murmurs rippled around the table. Natalie remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Furthermore, Gregory continued, she has brought in a foreign researcher with questionable credentials and methods, creating significant liability exposure for Meridian. That's quite an accusation, James Wong said mildly. What evidence do you have? Gregory nodded to Janet, who distributed folders to each board member. These documents detailed the development of what they're calling Protocol NX7. Pay particular attention to pages 12 through 17, which outline discussions about administering the treatment in Mexico to avoid regulatory oversight. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Those were private conversations held in Natalie's office just hours earlier. The only way Gregory could have them was, you bugged her office, he said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Gregory didn't deny it. Corporate security has wide latitude to monitor potential threats to the company. Megasecond. Harrington's recent erratic behavior certainly qualified. That's illegal surveillance, Natalie said, her voice steady despite the fury Daniel could see in her eyes. Perhaps, Gregory conceded. But the content of those recordings is far more damning than the method of obtaining them. Natalie looked around the table. Let me be absolutely clear. Protocol NX7 is a legitimate research initiative that has shown extraordinary promise in lab tests. We have had preliminary discussions about accelerated approval pathways, including international options, but no illegal actions have been taken. Yet, Janet added pointedly, the board cannot allow Meridian to be associated with treatments that circumvent proper safety protocols, Gregory declared. Therefore, I move that Ms. Harrington be immediately removed as CEO for ethical violations. and breach of fiduciary duty. The room erupted in crosstalk. Daniel watched in growing horror as board members began taking sides, with the balance tipping against Natalie. The carefully laid plans for Emma's treatment were unraveling before his eyes. "Wait," he said, standing suddenly. The room fell silent. "Before you vote, there's something you should know." Natalie looked at him sharply, a warning in her eyes that he chose to ignore. "Protocol NX7 isn't just a theoretical treatment, Daniel. It's shown complete reversal of symptoms in previously terminal cases of similar neurological disorders. Dr. Kapoor has documented proof. Anecdotal evidence from unregulated trials." Gregory dismissed. "Maybe," Daniel acknowledged. "But what if it works? What if this treatment could save thousands of children? Are you willing to destroy that possibility because of corporate politics?" Richard Carrington scoffed. "This is exactly why decisions like this shouldn't involve emotional parties. Mr. Reeves is hardly objective. His daughter has the condition." "Yes, she does," Daniel agreed. "And that's precisely why I understand what's at stake better than anyone in this room. This isn't about stock prices or corporate reputation. It's about children's lives." He turned, dressed the full board. "You all know my story by now. I was a janitor who stumbled across evidence that Meridian's supposedly breakthrough drug was dangerous. I risked everything to bring that truth to light. And Harrington, despite knowing it would cost her company billions, did the right thing. Single quotes." He paused, making eye contact with each board member. "Now you're faced with the same choice. You can side with Gregory, who bugged his CEO's office and stole proprietary research. Or you can stand with the woman who has twice chosen ethics over profit first with Neurogen, and now with Protocol NX7. The room was silent when he finished. Several board members looked uncomfortable, glancing between Gregory and Natalie. "This is all very moving," Gregory said finally, his tone condescending. "But the fact remains that Harrington was planning to violate FDA regulations. That cannot stand." "No, she wasn't," Daniel countered. "I was." He squared his shoulders. "I asked no. I begged her to help me take Emma somewhere the treatment could be administered immediately. She refused, insisting we find a legal pathway." It wasn't entirely true, but close enough that Daniel could say it convincing. He saw Natalie's subtle nod of understanding. "That conversation," she added smoothly, "which you illegally recorded, was me explaining to Mr. Reeves why we couldn't pursue the route he was suggesting. The fact that you only have partial recordings is evident in your misrepresentation." Gregory's confidence wavered visibly. "That's not, I think," Dr. Patel interjected, "that we should hear the full recordings before making any decisions, particularly since they were obtained through questionable means." Other board members nodded in agreement. "In the meantime," Natalie said, rising to her feet, "I'm launching a full investigation into the theft of proprietary research materials from our labs last night. Security footage and access logs point to corporate espionage, possibly involving members of this board." Gregory's face paled. "That's absurd, is it?" Natalie cut him off. "Because I find it awfully coincidental that you're calling for my removal hours after someone stole the very research you're now using against me." The balance of power in the room shifted perceptibly. James Wong cleared his throat. "I move that we table the vote on Ms. Harrington's leadership, pending a full investigation of both matters, the alleged ethics violations and the research theft." "Seconded," Dr. Patel said immediately. The motion passed 7-5 as the meeting adjourned. Natalie grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him quickly from the room before Gregory or his allies could approach. "That was close," she murmured, guiding him toward her office. "Too close." "What now?" Daniel asked, the adrenaline of the confrontation giving way to bone-deep worry. "They'll regroup, come at us again." Natalie's eyes gleamed with determined calculation. "Now we accelerate our timeline. We need to move on Protocol NX7 before Gregory can block us." Dawn broke over the city, painting Meridian Tower in pale gold light. Natalie hadn't been home in 36 hours. Neither had Daniel. They'd spent the night in her office with Dr. Kapoor and Dr. Chun, finalizing what they now called the contingency plan. "The Mexican facility can be ready in 3 days, Doctor," Kapoor confirmed, circling a location on a map spread across Natalie's desk. "My colleague Dr. Rivera has arranged everything. The equipment is in place and he's assembled a small team of specialists." Dr. Chun looked troubled. "The protocol still needs refinement. Our latest simulations show we're out of time for refinement," Natalie interrupted gently. "Gregory is moving to block us legally. He's already filed injunctions against any further development of NX-7 on the ground corporate security concern. But we haven't even completed safety testing, Dr. Chun." Daniel, who had been silent for much of the meeting, finally spoke. "Emma had another seizure last night, a bad one. Dr. Winters says her neurological function is deteriorating rapidly." His voice was steady, but his eyes reflected exhaustion and fear. "Safety testing doesn't matter if she doesn't survive long enough to receive treatment." The room fell silent. The stark reality of their situation hung heavy in the air. "Here's what we're gonna do," Natalie said finally, her CEO voice cutting through the tension. "Dr. Kapoor will take the original formulation notes and go to Mexico immediately to oversee final preparation. Dr. Chun will continue the official research here, but focus on documentation and analysis of existing data rather than new development. That way you're not violating the injunction." "And Emma?" Daniel asked, the question barely audible. Natalie met his gaze. "You and I will take her to Mexico tomorrow night." My private jet will be waiting at a small airfield outside the city. The hospital believes she's being transferred to a specialist facility for an experimental but FDA-approved treatment. Which is technically true, Dr. Kapoor noted. Just not in the location they assume. What about the board? Dr. Chun asked. Gregory will realize what's happening. James Wong is keeping Gregory occupied with an internal investigation into the research theft, Natalie replied. It will buy us at least 48 hours. By then we'll be in Mexico and the treatment will be underway. Dr. Chun still looked uncomfortable. If this goes wrong, if this goes wrong, I take full responsibility, Natalie said firmly. I've prepared documentation stating that you and Dr. Kapoor advised against this accelerated timeline but were overruled by me personally. Your careers will be protected. The meeting concluded with solemn nods and a sense of grave purpose. As the scientists left to begin preparations, Daniel remained behind with Natalie. You're risking everything, he said quietly. Your company, your reputation, possibly even your freedom. Natalie smiled tiredly. Perspective is a powerful thing, Daniel. 6 months ago, I thought everything meant market share and shareholder value. Now ... single quotes, she trailed off, gazing out at the awakening city. Now I understand what really matters. He crossed the room to stand beside her at the window. I wish there was some way I could protect you from the fallout. There isn't, she said simply, and that's okay. She turned to face him, her professional mask slipping to reveal the woman beneath, vulnerable, determined, and fiercely caring. I made my choice the moment I saw Emma's face light up when I gave her that yellow journal. Some things are worth any price. Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of mere seconds. Get some rest, Natalie said softly. Tomorrow will be ... intense. You too, he replied, though neither made a move to break the connection between them. For a brief, suspended moment, the world outside fell away. They were no longer CEO and employee, not just allies in a desperate mission, but simply a man and a woman standing on the precipice of something profound. Daniel felt himself leaning forward, drawn by an invisible gravity. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. They stepped apart as Vanessa entered with an urgent expression. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation, she said, handing Natalie a tablet. Dr. Winters called. Emma's been moved to intensive care. Daniel's world tilted sharply. What? Why wasn't I notified? It happened 20 minutes ago, Vanessa explained. They tried your cell, but it's dead, Daniel realized, pulling the phone from his pocket. In the chaos of the past day, he'd forgotten to charge it. Natalie was already moving. My car's downstairs. We'll go directly to the hospital. The drive to St. Margaret's passed in a blur of silent dread. Daniel stared out the window, mentally berating himself for not being there when Emma needed him. Natalie's hand found his again in the darkness of the back seat, an anchor in the storm. Dr. Winters met them at the IQ entrance, his face grave. Emma experienced a cascading neural event, essentially, multiple seizures occurring simultaneously across different brain regions. We've stabilized her for now, but single quotes, but what? Daniel demanded when the doctor hesitated. The damage is extensive. Her autonomic functions are beginning to be affected. Heart rate, respiration. We've had to intubate her to assist with breathing. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Natalie's arm slipped around his waist, supporting him. Can we see her? She asked. Dr. Winters nodded. Briefly. She's heavily sedated. Emma looked impossibly small in the adult-sized ICU bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, monitoring every vital function. A tube ran from her mouth to a ventilator that rhythmically forced air into her lungs. Her yellow headband had been removed, replaced by electrodes monitoring brain activity. Daniel approached slowly, as if in a trance. He gently took her tiny hand, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. Her skin felt cool to the touch. Hey, Starlight, he whispered. Daddy's here. Natalie stood a few steps back, giving him space, but her presence was a tangible comfort in the sterile room. Doctor, Winters checked the monitors. Her neural activity is severely depressed. We're doing everything we can, but ... Go. What's the prognosis? Natalie asked directly. When it became clear Daniel couldn't form the question, the doctor sighed heavily. At this rate of deterioration, without some form of intervention we've not yet considered, days, maybe a week. The world seemed to stop. Daniel had known Emma was getting worse, had seen the symptoms progress, but somehow he'd convinced himself they had more time, that the research would advance quickly enough, that a miracle would happen. The Mexico plan, he said suddenly, turning to Natalie. We need to move now. Tonight, Daniel, Dr. Winters began, his tone cautious. Emma is in no condition to travel, let alone receive experimental treatment. She'll die if we do nothing, Daniel countered, desperation edging his voice. You just said so yourself. Natalie stepped forward. Dr. Winters, if there was a treatment that showed promise in reversing Gleason's damage, even in advanced cases, would you consider it despite the risks? The doctor looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're talking about Protocol NX7. At their surprised expressions, he added, the medical community is small. Word travels, especially about potential breakthroughs. Then you know it's Emma's only chance, Daniel said. Dr. Winters was silent for a long moment, his professional caution warring with compassion. As her physician, I cannot recommend an untested protocol. He paused, then added more quietly, as someone who has watched too many children lose this battle, I understand the impossible choice you're facing. He moved toward the door. I need to check on other patients. I'll be gone for approximately 30 minutes. During that time, I won't be available to authorize or prevent any decisions regarding Emma's care. After he left, Natalie turned to Daniel. We need to decide now. Moving her in this condition ... is dangerous, Daniel finished. I know, but staying means certain death. He looked down at his daughter's pale face, the tube obscuring her sweet smile. What would you do if it were Michael? Natalie didn't hesitate. Everything possible, no matter the risk or cost. Their eyes met in perfect understanding. Daniel nodded once decisively. Then we go tonight.